For those tough wake-ups.
Stats are misleading.
It's Marsh and Melo.
Nature foul.
Wake up to serious sports talk.
T-Fist is there.
It's Marsh.
The CFL, baby.
And Melo.
I love Canada.
It's Marsh and Melo.
This is football!
For those tough wake-ups.
They're heating up.
It's Marsh and Melo.
Coming your way, Hamilton.
Wake up to serious sports talk.
Gas tank gonna be full.
It's Marsh.
In Canada.
And Melo.
Why not, eh?
It's Marsh and Melo.
Thank you, Canada.
Everybody's doing it. The more I listen to that intro, the more aggressive it seems. Just hearing Corey Chamberlain scream, "This is football" at me, I'm like, that's kind of a rude awakening on a Monday morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here with us on Marsh and Melo. As always, we appreciate it. He is at Kyle_Melo_. I'm at TSN_Marsh. We are at Marsh and Melo, and we are on at CF Perspective, Canadian football perspective for you here at the conclusion of week number 12. That's right. You have been watching football for 3 months straight, my friends. Congratulations to everybody who's made it all the way through week 12. Having yourself a time here in the Canadian Football League as we make our way through 2021. Bit of a grind at this point, not going to lie, but it's a little refreshing that usually at week 12 we're like, hey, it's Labor Day. This year we're like, hey, there's like 3 weeks left. So 13, 14, 15, 16 is what we have got left on the table at this point. And the season chugging along, lots of fun storylines. We got it all covered for you here as always, and we'll dive into all of them. But first, we got to let you know that our good friends at Fox 40 have got you covered. If you are getting back into the game, don't forget to involve them in that process. The Canadian Football Perspective podcast brought to you by our friends at Fox 40, the worldwide leaders in whistle technology for all of your whistle needs and much, much more. Just go to fox40shop.com. They're the best in the biz, and one of the best breweries in all of Ontario has decided to help us out as well, as they've got themselves a great promo code CFL for you. Get your free shipping on your first order over $100. Sawdust City Brewing up in Gravenhurst, Ontario. God's country, as they like to say. They will give you great deals and, of course, great beer. I would love if I could have one of their coffee stouts, not going to lie, on a Monday morning. I feel like that would be better. That would be better than the coffee that I just made a couple of minutes ago that before we hopped on, I was telling Kyle Melo, I'm not good at making coffee. It was just a Keurig situation. It wasn't like a French press or any of those fancy things that people use, Kyle. But nice to have Sawdust City and Fox 40 here helping us out as we make our way throughout the Canadian Football League season. I got to see you in the flesh on Saturday afternoon. It was weird. You tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and I went, who is this person I've been talking to for months via Zoom?
I stood in the doorway and I just said, wow, they're letting anybody do broadcasts now. And you didn't hear me. So that's when I tapped you on the shoulder.
Yeah. When you tapped me and said that to me again, I just kind of laughed because I was like, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, it's done.
I didn't even know you were going to be down there.
I like to not pump it up too much on the old social media machine and be like, I've got the Ticats. This is going to be the greatest game ever. This blah, blah, blah. So I like to lay low a little bit, just be like,
yeah.
And then I show up at games. My hope is that if I lay low and I don't despise me, that if the game comes on and you hear that it's me calling it, you go, oh, that's fun. And then maybe you get excited, because if I say to you ahead of time, maybe you don't get as excited when you hear my voice. Just trying to, make you have a nice little time on your Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. I got to the stadium a little bit later than I usually do.
Same.
And
didn't love that. Did not love showing up later. I like to show up like 5 hours early. I got there 2 hours early and I was pissed. So
and I was in the press box and somebody walked by me and they're like, I just had a conversation with Marshall. I'm like, huh? He's here? Yeah, he's doing the game on TV. I'm like, I had no clue. So that's when I went over to the TV studio to say hi.
Good. That's cool. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, man. Like, I was talking to a couple of people that were asking, hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying calling the games? And man, I love calling these games so much, but I'll be honest with you. I really appreciate A, the TSN higher ups, and B, the fans, the viewers, the consumers who have been so kind, but more than being kind, because it's easy to be kind. Like, it's the simplest thing is to just be like, hey, good for you. The tough thing is that when you don't love the way that someone's doing something, to just give you time. And that's what I've been given here with some of these games, is to kind of find my footing. And I was texting you last night, Kyle, because we were kind of going back and forth on how this game specifically went in the call, and I'm like, every game I'm learning is so different. Like depending on the game situation, the score, how many explosive plays there are in the game, the storylines of the game going in, how the game changes throughout the game, how the weather affects the game, the people that you're working with in the truck, the people that you're working with in the booth. Like it is every single game is a snowflake. It is so different. And I came out of this game loving working with Dunnigan. It was so much fun. Like that guy is an absolute riot. And during the scariest thing about working with Dunnigan, and people probably assume this, the scariest thing is that during the commercial breaks, he just wants to talk football. And he has he has no idea when we're coming back from the break, what we're doing when we come back from the break, because he just wants to talk football. And you might say like, oh, that's terrible to work with in television. I love it because we would go to break and he would say, I mean, Caleb's got to see the cover too. I mean, he got the safety rolling over the top right there, Marsh. I mean, the linebackers flying out, to the flats. I know you saw it, you called it. I mean, he's standing flat-footed and he's got to flip his. And meanwhile, in my other ear, I've got Mike Marshall, our producer, going, okay, guys, when we come back, we're going to have visual up here of Caleb Evans in his last 3 weeks. And then on the back end, we've got a tag, little sideline shot of Duck Hodges, and Matthew is down on the sideline, Shinetti, ready with a report on kind of the future of the Ottawa quarterbacking situation. So I've got that in one ear, and in the other ear, they got a blitz. They got to get after it. And it's so much fun. And then the producer will be like, okay, guys, back in 30. And Dunnigan's going up. Back in 15. Matty's still talking football. 10. And he's not even wrapping his thought. He's like, and another thing. And then it hits like 3, 2. And he's like, anyways. And he just and he just stops like inside 5 seconds, and it's slightly terrifying. And there were a couple of times where I had to tap and be like, "Hey, we're coming back," kind of thing. But it's like at the same time, he knows. He knows how to fit perfectly inside those windows. And me as like the new guy, the rookie, I'm tapping him and being like, "Hey, man, like we got to chill. And he's like, "I know what I'm doing. It's fine." So that was super fun. There's lots of little things I want to work on to be better for you, for the CFL fans, to improve the call, and I'm chipping away at those things little bit by bit. But I just wanted to say I do appreciate. And the other thing, so this is my first time calling a game in Hamilton, which subsequently means it's my first time being at Tim Hortons Field this year, because I haven't been down to any other games, and I don't really go to games that I don't call these days because I got other stuff going on. So I ended up waking up, and I kind of had this vibe on Friday, Kyle, that it would feel a little bit different to call a game in Hamilton. And I was really excited, and I kind of thought it would be surreal and be, because for 5-6 years I'm standing down in the radio booth, which has this huge glass wall in front of it, and you don't even really feel like you're part of the stadium. And the TV booth in Hamilton it's wide and beautiful, and you're right at midfield, and you're overlooking all the action, and it's open air, and I really thought that it would feel special, and it did. But then as the game got closer and closer, there was like this overwhelming two things: sense of gratitude and also a sense of gravity of, man, wow, I can't believe, like, because I know how many people there are in the stands of, do you know what the attendance was for this game?
20,112, I think.
Okay, so 20,000 people, and this is not in some weird way like a humble brag or a weird stat I'm pulling out of my backside. I'm just saying there's probably 1,000 people out of those 20,000 that you and I have interacted with during our time covering the Ticats, being around the stadium, being at practice, being in the community. For me, being a football guy that went to McMaster, like there's that branch of connections and stuff. So the idea that I'm standing there and my voice is the one that gets to paint the game for you, even though the people in the stands aren't hearing it, it's like I feel a responsibility to those people, not just the 1,000 that I know, but the full 20,000. Yeah. But those 1,000 people that are down there, it's like I want to make them proud. I want to do this in a way that they can say, "Hey, I know that guy. I work with that guy." So there was this sense of gravity, but it was also that gratitude feeling of looking around and going, "Man, this is a place that I really started to fall in love with the Canadian Football League." Because when I'm at McMaster, I'll be honest, I didn't really give a damn about the CFL. And that might seem weird to people. Like I would watch a lot of games and follow it and all the rest, but I didn't really know what the CFL was about. I didn't really understand the game. I was just a stupid university student running around, drinking beers, playing football, going to class. And then when I got hired by TSN Radio in Hamilton and started working with you, we would go down to practice all the time. And it's like, that's where I started to understand, oh, that's how this game is played on and off the field.
Yeah.
So to be back in that place where I kind of, and it's not about liking the Ticats more than your team. I don't give a damn about who wins, who loses. I say that all the time. It doesn't matter to me. But being in that stadium, that chunk of land has a special place in my heart. And to be the one person with the microphone calling the action standing up top there, it was a heavy feeling. And I thought it was going to be very joyous. And as it got closer and closer to game time, I'm like, okay, I like this, but also, man, this is a lot to take in being up here in this position. And anyways, it's a very long-winded, stupid, rambling way of me saying, I hope you enjoyed the call. And I hope that everybody had a fantastic time, and we're going to recap all the games for you here. So I'll stop being self-indulgent.
No problem. That's interesting that you didn't really cover the CFL when you were working or when you were playing at McMaster.
Mm-hmm.
Did it come more of a thing for you when you went to Stampeders training camp?
So yes and no. For me, it's interesting. When I was in high school, I worked at Pizza in Kingston, right on the corner of where my high school was. And I was working the front cash, and I would work basically from 4 o'clock until the dinner rush was down every Friday and every Saturday, which usually was like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at the latest kind of thing. And I was allowed, this is probably bad, but I was allowed from the people that employed me to just take a meal, whatever I wanted. Was that 3 slices of pizza? Was that chicken bites? Was that whatever?
Yeah.
And so every Friday and every Saturday when I was in high school, I would take, a meal home, go down in my basement, which I had the whole basement to myself when I was in high school with my broom down there and a television, all this stuff. And I would sit and I would watch every single CFL game. It became this addiction for me where I've always loved the Buffalo Bills and watching the NFL on Sundays. And then as you become older, you become more aware, and then you start to know people who are around the CFL and involved in it. And so I fell in love with watching it when I was in high school, which helped, I think, accentuate my love for playing the game. But then I became so focused on playing. And you got to realize too, the timeline on stuff is that in the summer months, the CFL is playing games, and once in a while we would go down to Ivor Wynne or Tim Hortons Field. But in the summer months, we're training and we're working and taking summer classes, and there's not a whole lot of time for me to like catch every single game all the time. So you kind of fall out of touch with it. And that's why when I went to Stampeders training camp in 2013, it made me more aware of Calgary, and it educated my view even further on what the league's really about. But it was really when I first started covering them on sidelines pre-halftime and post in 2015, my first year out of university, that I started to get a sense for, oh, okay, this is like, I didn't really understand this league. I thought I did. And it's funny too, because 2016 me, and this is probably the same for you, Kyle, and tell me if I'm wrong, but 2016 me was way more educated than 2015 me. 2017 me was way more educated than 2016 me, and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's like every single year you understand the game differently, you understand the league differently. There's little chunks and pieces that educate you, and so you go into the next year and you understand. And that's just the stuff that comes with time and effort and exposure and being around it. And I mean, hell, you're not calling the Ticats games on TSN, but you're at all the Ticats games and you're watching all the CFL games. And so next year you will be better off for that as well, because you will feel more educated and a more depth of knowledge, I would say, from being around the game. It's just natural. It's the way we all evolve, right?
Yeah. And it's not only just, because I didn't start covering the team until 2017 when me and you started rolling with Marsh and Melo.
Yeah.
2015, I was just a part-timer at TSN. 2016 season, I was producing all the Ticats games, so I was always in studio for those games. And then 2017, when we got the show, I was already down at the games in 2017, and then our show started kind of right when middle of the season, just after Labor Day, and I started going to practice, and I didn't really understand the CFL probably looking back on it until I started going to practice. And it's not even just looking at what the team's working on and things like that. It's being around the people of the CFL that cover the CFL. I've been covering the CFL for a long time, Steve Milton as well.
Yeah.
And just talking to Steve for so long, every single day, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. There's things in the CFL like you don't realize, like salary cap implications, right? Oh, and now that's why I'm able in 2021 to, come on this platform and say, why aren't the Ticats fixing certain problems they have on the roster? Oh, they got no money. That's why they haven't done anything, right? And I look back on that and I think I was kind of ignorant when I stepped into this because I grew up a fan of the CFL and I grew up a fan of the Ticats, that I had all these preconceived notions of what I thought the game of CFL football was. And I was kind of wrong. I was kind of wrong.
One of the first learnings I had that really was like a thunderbolt to the side of the head was when Coach John Salavantis, who showed up in the press booth on Saturday afternoon wearing what most people would term a vintage Ticats starter jacket. It's just his jacket. He's had it since 1986. So it's not really vintage. It's not throwback. It's just a thing.
Masoli sweater going into the game?
That was pretty cool too. Yeah.
Where do you get that?
I don't know. There's places around.
Masoli has hookups for vintage t-shirt places.
So somebody from a vintage place probably DM. There's actually a vintage clothing place in Westdale. I saw that selling a Chicago Bulls 1998 NBA Finals champion t-shirt, like vintage old sports clothing. But the t-shirt with the Bulls championship stuff is $100 for a cotton t-shirt. I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna buy.
They have to ask a premium. They've been holding on to that for a long time.
I guess. But the thing that struck me with Coach Sal, he told me way back in the day, was 2015. I think it was Eric Norwood. Is that name a defensive end?
Eric Norwood. I remember.
So Eric Norwood went down with injury. In comes Arnaud Gascon-Don, and the ratio changes, and they have to play a Canadian there. And Coach Sal says to me after the game, "Why do you think Ottawa started running it so much?" No, I don't know. They were having success, so why not keep doing it? No, they started running it because a guy who weighs 50 pounds less and doesn't really look like a defensive end came into the game because the ratio rules required that he had to play in that spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes more sense. So, and that was another one of those things that kind of leans into that. But anyways, let's focus on week number 12 around the Canadian Football League here. We don't want to keep this podcast too long because it was there was lots of stuff that was going on, and I want to dive into it here. So let's go back to Friday evening. The Argos, man, the East Division is very, very interesting right now at the top for obvious reasons, because the records are all tied up at 6-4 between Montreal and Toronto. Montreal playing at home, played some inspired football. Matthew Schultz ends up getting the victory. Trevor Harris not yet into that starting role, as I think a lot of people assume he will be. But in this game, Schultz ends up only completing 12 passes, but they put up 37 points. Why? William Stanback, 24 carries, 203 yards, 1 touchdown, had a long run of 65. Schultz, it's funny, on his 12 completions, 2 of them were touchdowns. That's a ridiculously high percentage of your passes that go for touchdowns. But he ends up running an offense. I looked it up this morning, Kyle, when I was charting some stuff on the way in, that he ends up essentially running an offense that is calling pass plays 41% of the time in this game. And I wondered when Schultz came in whether or not they would lean heavy on the running game. A couple of games in, that's the way that it looks. I understand time and score certainly changed that as well, because they were just trying to run the clock and protect the ball and all the rest. But to see Schultz with only 18 attempts and to see McLeod Bethel-Thompson with 40, but he had 4 interceptions as well out of those 40 attempts. This was a lopsided victory for Montreal. Toronto couldn't stop the run, and Toronto tried to throw their way back into it. They just couldn't.
Do you think at any point this season the Argos are going to run it back and put Nick Arbuckle in if he's healthy?
I struggle with this. This is an interesting question because I see Nick as having... Man, it's so tough. Nick has so much potential, and I like him, and I like his game. But McLeod he just refuses to quit. Like, McLeod Bethel-Thompson's energy, and even when he's throwing 4 interceptions and he's, freaking out on the odd receiver because he's very passionate on the field, which I love, makes for great GIF content. Anytime that I see the ups and the downs of McLeod Bethel-Thompson, and this is obviously a down, I think to myself, I've seen this story before. He has the down, and then he bounces back inevitably. So they could, I mean, going into this game, which I'll be calling with Matt Dunnigan, it is Toronto against BC on Saturday afternoon this coming week. I could totally see Nick Arbuckle being, if he's healthy, being up and getting an opportunity. But again, Toronto is such a conundrum to try and analyze because they feel so different week to week to week. But at home, they've been very, very similar most of their games, and they've had a lot of success at home. So my synopsis as I dance around this is Nick deserves a chance. Nick is good enough to start. Nick probably should be starting, but McLeod just won't quit. And when McLeod goes up and down and up and down and up and down, it doesn't matter because his ups are good enough for you to respect it and want him in there. And his downs, for me, I used to go, oh, he's awful. He's never going to be able to do this. And now I look at his downs as, well, it's just a blip in the road. He's going to have another up because that's what he does, because you got to ride the wave with him.
It's interesting. And the reason why I bring up that point about Nick Arbuckle potentially stepping back into the starting job is because I wrote on CF Perspective this week when I was breaking down this game from the gambling side of things. I said, McLeod Bethel-Thompson is essentially, if he would have went out in this game against Montreal and had a good performance and the Argos won, I wouldn't have been surprised if Dinwiddie just said publicly, hey, this is your team, from here on out.
Well, didn't they say that when Arbuckle was allegedly on the trade block, like was being offered up in some of those discussions with Montreal and potentially with Edmonton, and the idea that would come out, I don't think that that's incredible journalistic reporting and investigative journalism. I think somebody leaked that. And for them to leak that, I'm like, what the hell are you doing to Nick? What did Nick do to you? Like, and the idea that Nick Arbuckle would be able to play on 3 of the 4 teams in the East Division over a 2-year span and barely play for any of them when he was involved in those Montreal discussions, I was like, this is crazy that he is not being trusted. And even if he is being trusted, he can't stay healthy, and that's being held against him at this point. So it's frustrating for me not to see Nick on the field, which, by the way, did you see the pythons on that guy? Like on the sideline in the Montreal game, it's cold and all, but I gotta leave myself a note here for a second after we finish our conversation about Montreal Toronto, because I got something to say about people wearing balaclavas in late October. But Nick is on the sidelines wearing a muscle shirt, and he's built like a fullback. It's amazing that his shoulder has enough mobility to be able to throw. And I've talked with Matthew Shinetti about Nick's workout regimen. We all know at this point,
Shinetti follows it.
Yeah, that's true. Shinetti's in great shape too. I don't think people realize how jacked Matt is, but when I talked to Matt about it, he said, well, his mom obviously passing away at a young age. If you saw the story on Bell Let's Talk Day last year, Shinetti did a special feature on SportsCenter. It was really emotional, and for me as a new parent, honestly, it made me tear up watching it, because it was just like the connection of parent to child, and the way that Nick talks about it still to this day is very difficult. But his way of coping with that is working out, and always has been working out. And he works out relentlessly to the point where it hurts him. Like he gets dinged trying to push himself. And you can see that his body is just rock solid. And like, he is such a strong guy. But the idea of him not being able to get on the field with the amount of work that he puts in, to me, is frustrating, because he deserves an opportunity. And I don't know why he's not really being given. And maybe I'm just holding that. Maybe it's a set of circumstances that's out of his control. Maybe he is being trusted, and maybe Ottawa, Paul LaPolice really just wanted to work with Matt Nichols. We know how that worked too. Maybe in Toronto, they really do want him to be the franchise guy, but he's been injured, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson is playing some decent football from week to week. So it's like, I don't want to create this grand narrative that like nobody trusts Nick Arbuckle and he's being screwed over and there's somebody out there in the league who's out to get him, but it's frustrating to not see him on the field, because I like watching him play, and he's proven that he can play when given the opportunity and when healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting that, McLeod Bethel-Thompson goes out and obviously he struggles, 4 interceptions on the day. But I don't think this loss was on McLeod. I mean, you turn over the ball 4 times. It's probably on you, a large part of it. But defensively, for everything we thought about the Argos up until this point, William Stanback just punched that in the face.
Yeah, well, and to the point of the running backs, like when Toronto beat Winnipeg, who looks unbeatable at this point in the season, they were running up and down the field, and it was the dual punch of John White and DJ Foster. Well, in this game, DJ Foster had 3 carries for 5 yards. Like that was it. That was it. The entire game was 3 carries for 5 yards, and John White had 4 carries for 20 yards.
Yeah.
So the idea of how Toronto wants to play this game, maybe time score situation didn't allow for it, but it was an interesting setup because I think we should remember this one if Toronto gets to the Grey Cup and plays against Winnipeg. Because when you,
I find it funny that you're penciling in Winnipeg.
No, well, yeah, that too. But I'm just saying, if Winnipeg gets there, we know what Winnipeg wants to do. We've talked about it throughout the season. Maximum 25 passing attempts. They want to run the ball with Andrew Harris behind their big offensive line, hit some play action, and make some touchdown shots to Kenny Lawler. That's their formula on offense. Well, what you just saw here from Montreal was run the ball with William Stanback, 24 carries. And go play action, hit a couple of shots down the field to their big play receiver, which is Geno Lewis. 7 targets, 7 receptions, 2 touchdowns, 156 yards. He basically played the role of Kenny Lawler. William Stanback basically played the role of Andrew Harris. And what did Toronto do in response? Oh, let's throw the ball 40 times.
Yeah.
It was like, that's not really who you are. And so they got forced out of their comfort zone. And it makes me wonder, if Toronto does make their way through the East and does make it to a Grey Cup, and I know there's a lot of ifs in this, but if they make it to the Grey Cup and they play Winnipeg, if Winnipeg is controlling the time of possession and is controlling the ground game, would Toronto freak out and let's start throwing it everywhere? Or would they be able to fight their way into the game with what has got them to this point, which has been the dual running back setup or efficiently running the football? I don't know the answer to that. I just think this Montreal game was an interesting look into how Toronto responds to being taken out of their comfort zone in the style and the game plan they want to use.
Yeah, it's always score that kind of dictates too on how the rhythm of the game is going along and whether or not you stick to your game plan. And for the Toronto Argonauts, what was it? Down 21-10 at halftime, and Montreal didn't let up in the third quarter. And it's like, okay, now we're trying to chase the game. Yeah. So for Toronto getting off to a better start and putting up points early in the game, because I thought in the first quarter, the Argos get out of the quarter, they're up 3-0, but that's when your offense should have put up some scores, just so you can get ahead of things and you can stick to that run game. And you look at the rushing statistics in the game. John White only 20 yards rushing, and it's like, well, if you're going to do that, then you're going to put all the pressure on your quarterback. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson, for as good of a backup as I think he is, and as at times a good quarterback that can sling it, but when you're a slinger, it also goes the other way too. And I just thought that's what happened Friday night.
Yep, no doubt on that. I also want to give just a quick shout out here to Arjun Colhoun. I don't know Arjun at all, but that injury to his ankle lower leg looked pretty nasty, and there was the pause in the game, and they had to bring out the stretcher to. I assume it was an air cast situation and probably surgery involved. It looked like a broken ankle. The leg was just completely wrapped the wrong direction. So hate to see that. Hate to see that for the Canadian guys. And I was thinking about him a little bit through the weekend. So I hope that that is not something that's going to damage his ability to continue to play football, because he's bounced around a little bit, been a good depth guy, and played lots of specials. And again, I don't know the guy, but I hope that is not too severe of an injury. Game number 2 of the weekend is the one that Kyle and I were both at. Man, it was fun to see Tim Hortons field that full, wasn't it? Yeah, the crowd was fantastic. I thought there was a lot of energy in there.
Not sold out though.
No, but that's something that we've seen everywhere. And I saw a tweet this week that was mentioning, I don't know if it was the Leafs and the Raptors, or if it was the Flames and the Oilers, or it was basically people saying, like, in Saskatchewan, they haven't had sellouts. I heard someone say in Edmonton that there's been this disconnect between the old fan base that wanted to keep them as the old team name and the old logo and all this, and the new generation, the transition into becoming the Elks. And so people will still buy their season tickets. They just won't go to the games. And so you just end up with a bunch of empty seats at those games.
You pick and choose what games they go to.
Yeah, and it's like they're more selective because the team isn't great, and that, I don't want to waste my night with this team, but I bought season tickets because the deal is good or whatever. And so I don't think that that's exclusive to Hamilton, and I don't think it's exclusive to the CFL. We're seeing this all over the sports landscape right now. Maybe the NFL is the one thing that's able to break through and make none of that stuff matter, because the NFL is just a drug that people cannot unhook themselves from the IV of.
Yeah.
And so they seem to be immune to this, as they do to a lot of other things. But I thought the energy inside the stadium was great. It was great to see Jeremiah Masoli piece together one of those good Masoli days. And when I say that, it's because I've always talked about Jeremiah as good Masoli, bad Masoli. And the good Masoli is high completion percentage, hit a couple of touchdown shots, use your legs a little bit. And you can just get a sense when he's in a rhythm and when his footwork is good. And sometimes he still throws off his back foot, and sometimes he still makes you scratch your head with the odd decision. But if he can make one or two great plays, it usually can counteract any of those throw off your back foot, sliding sideways and all the rest, or trying to get away from a sack and make a play you don't need to. The thing I thought was really interesting was in our Zoom call leading into this game, Jeremiah's whole mentality was, simply put, and I think I mentioned this on the broadcast, but he said to us at one point, we're bouncing back and forth on rhythm and where you're at and trying to find chemistry with your receivers and stuff. And he just kind of stopped at one point, and we asked him about the Grey Cup signage going up around the stadium and around Hamilton soon. And will that add some extra gravity to it? And will it start to become real that there's a home Grey Cup for you guys potentially? And he just said, it's time. He's like, it's time. It's time to go. Like we've been messing around and figuring it out and dealing with injuries and roster construction, all this stuff all year. And you get the sense, and I'm not a huge fan of this expression, but you get the sense that in the Ticats locker room right now, they're saying it's nut crunching time, boys. It is time to go. It is, they realize really heavily right now that it's do or die. And I think that's because everybody, myself included, predicted at the start of the season that they would be at the top of the East, like probably running away. And Derek Taylor was saying, I don't know if they lose a game this year, they might run the table. Well, week one, they lose to Winnipeg, and we all see how the season shakes out from there.
Yeah.
But to see the way that Hamilton played in this game, and I get it, it's Ottawa, they've struggled, worst offense coming in, one of the worst defenses coming in, but they played with a sense of urgency, I thought, in this game that said to me going forward, they're pretty locked in. And I think it's because they're looking at the standings and they're seeing, oh, there's not just one team ahead of us, there's two teams ahead of us. And we only have a couple of games left to get to the top where we can host even in an East semifinal, let alone an East final, let alone get to the Grey Cup, which we're all expecting to try and be there, because we thought at the start of the year we would absolutely come out of the East and be in the home Grey Cup. So there is a sense of urgency around the black and gold right now that I haven't felt in my time covering this team.
So as we, head down the home stretch here of the regular season, it looks more and more with every passing week that there's not going to be a crossover this year.
Right.
Just BC kind of looks dead in the water.
Yeah, BC was the threat, right? Like,
yeah, BC's the threat.
Edmonton was out of the question, and BC was the threat, and now BC is just one of the most disappointing things I've ever. So we'll get to them in a couple of minutes, but yeah, the crossover doesn't look like a real threat right now.
Right. So if you're Hamilton, you have a potential to at least stay in the East for those playoff games, and after the result on Friday night with Montreal beating Toronto, I was talking to somebody and they said 2 home games left. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, after this, 2 home games left. He's like, I don't think we're going to see a home playoff game for the Ticats until a potential, Grey Cup. And I was like, if I'm Hamilton, look, I'm not scared of anybody if I have to go on the road. But if you're playing Montreal or Toronto, I think you're put in a better position, put yourself in a better position to potentially, go out and put a good performance on the field and win a game and move on and, get one step closer to the Grey Cup. I just want to preface this with, we have to take the opponent into consideration. The Ticats look fantastic. You don't know a team's bad until you see them in person. boy, Ottawa's bad. It was the
Yeah.
first time I got to see him this year in person. And look, Caleb Evans, what did he start the game? 12 of 13 passing. And I'm like, yeah, it's check down city. And when it's check down city, you can, rack up that completion percentage. It's, are you threatening enough? And they weren't threatening at all. They couldn't run the ball. And when they were throwing the ball, they struggled to protect. Ticats defensive line got after it. And then just defensively, I think the spirit that I probably talked about a month ago or so on this show about Ottawa and how, man, that defense plays hard for McBenavides. I didn't see that on Saturday. And you know the way it is, right? When you're losing games, it gets harder. Everything gets harder.
Yeah.
Waking up in the morning to go to practice is harder. Paying attention in meetings is harder because it's like, what the hell's the damn point? We suck anyways, right? Like that is the difficult part. And for Jeremiah Masoli, look, thrilled for Jeremiah that he finally had a performance that he wanted to have. To be honest, I was more impressed with Jeremiah, his ability in the fourth quarter, because you know the way it is, right? Hamilton, again, led by a boatload of points after the third quarter. And I was thinking, last two home games, Ticats led after three quarters and then just let it fall apart.
I think it was 15-3 in one game and 13-2 in the other going into the fourth. They lost both of them was the stat that I had when I was doing the prep for the game. So yeah, I mentioned that on the broadcast going into the fourth. I'm like, well, now's the time to prove it.
Yeah. And then Jeremiah came out and there was one throw that he had to Speedy, probably for 17 yards, right over the middle of the field. And the Ticats were inside their own 5. And I was thinking, okay, Ticats can't go 2-0 here, because if they go 2-0, they're probably going to give up a safety just to, win the field position. And Jeremiah comes out and just throws a rope to Speedy. And I was like, ooh, that was probably the best throw I've seen from Jeremiah this year. Just confident in, stepping into the throw. And that's my biggest thing with him. The offensive line I thought was better. I think Vorn Call is there to stay at left tackle. After Murray went on the 6-game injured list, again, the Ticats, for as poor as their offensive line stability has been this year, you always have to account for injuries. And it's like, okay, what are we after injuries? Darius Sirocco was a game time decision coming into the game. He plays the first series and then doesn't play the rest of the game. Yeah. Yarborough goes in at center. I'm not a big fan of Yarborough, and I don't think I would want him playing center for the long haul. Yarborough got blown up on that QB sneak attempt by Dane Evans, where Dane Evans kind of just went to the right and Yarborough just got pushed back right into Dane. It hit his hip, and then it threw the whole play off. But for the Ticats, I think it was a positive performance. And I should mention this too. And it goes back to our first conversation opening the show about knowing the CFL after you start covering the league in depth. So Darius Sirocco goes out after that first series. Well, Yarborough, not Canadian. So now the Ticats lose a Canadian and they've substituted an American in. This is after the whole Sean Thomas Erlington and Don Jackson being scratched before the game. And now all of a sudden Malik Irons gets injured, and Jackson Bennett, by the way, shout out to Jackson Bennett. I thought he had a hell of a performance.
Defensive back / linebacker extraordinaire in U Sports, turned into a running back, turned into a third string running back, turned into a second string running back on the depth chart because of this, turned into a first string running back after injury, runs the whole game, has his best game since Labor Day of 2019. It's the same thing with Johnny Augustine in Winnipeg. It's like, never gets his chance, and when he does, every single time he proves to you, anybody could run the ball. To Derek Taylor's point, Derek always says running backs don't really matter because you can just get any U Sports kid that runs hard and you're fine.
I'm glad DT echoed those sentiments about the quality of running backs or just athletes in Jackson Bennett's case, where he wasn't a running back and now is a running back, and I thought he ran hard. But the thing I was going to mention, Darius Sirocco goes out, Yarborough comes in, you lose a Canadian, and now the Ticats are kind of scrambling for, Canadians and where you can, fit those guys in. I mean, you can always put Tunde Adeleke to one of those other DB spots, and Katsatonis could step in at a safety spot. A couple of drives later, Braylon Addison goes down. And when Braylon Addison goes down, the only other two backup receivers the Ticats had was Tyler Czernowski and David Unger. And I'm like, okay, so the Ticats just made up that spot lost by Sirocco going out. So I was like, okay, that's not a thing anymore. So moving forward, I think for the Ticats, you have to take the positives from this game, but realize you're going to be in for a fight for the rest of the season. And it's going to be a different level of fight than the Red Blacks offered.
It's a great point by you about like almost nature's karma deciding how they were going to deal with that ratio issue. I was some combination of pissed off and sad that Braylon Addison got hurt, because he was so fun in that first quarter. Like 5 catches for 95 yards in the first.
He had 4 catches on the first drive.
He's so smooth. He's so good in and out of his breaks, and he just can't get fully healthy this year. I really hope he's not done for the year.
And then Jeremiah, we didn't know the injury. I just saw Jeremiah go down. I didn't know it was his nose. Can't tell from the press box until I looked at the TV. But I was thinking when Jeremiah was down, I was like, oh crap, now Dane's the only quarterback. I'm like, and Braylon Addison's the fill-in quarterback in case things go sideways, and he's out of the game.
Well,
I'm like, is Jalen Acklin the fill-in quarterback?
Probably. My thought as well was that when Malik Irons went down and Jackson Bennett was the only one, they usually would spell the running back, whoever it is, with a little bit of Braylon Addison, like 1 or 2 runs a game.
That too, yeah.
So you take him, and that's the thing is when Braylon goes down, everyone thinks, oh, he's such a good receiver. It's like, no, he's the Wildcat quarterback. He's going to get 2 to 3 rushing attempts per game. He's going to open things up for Speedy B. He's so multiple, and he plays at such a high level. I'll say this too about short yardage sneaks. You mentioned Yarbrough there getting blown up, and Dane. If I'm Ottawa, when I see the way that Duck Hodges tries, and I put in quotation marks, to do the quarterback sneak, why do you try again? It's very obvious he has no idea.
He shuffles his feet.
He doesn't go forwards.
No, he goes sideways.
It's very obvious. He's either never done that in his entire life, or or he hates doing it, and he was actively rebelling in hopes that he wouldn't have to do it anymore. Because that's the worst. When they had those 2 attempts down the goal line, and then they ended up kicking a 9-yard field goal. That's the worst attempt at quarterback sneaking I've seen in years.
By the way, why is Lapo calling 2 Q? And again, I love Lapo. Why is he calling 2 QB sneaks in a row if he's not going to go for it on third down?
Well, here's my thing as well, as an extension of the fact that like it's obvious that dude has no idea what he was doing. When Dane gets stuffed earlier and it ends up being that turnover on downs, I actually said to Matty Dunnigan in the booth, I'm like, why would you not just open it up and let it fly on, like throw it?
Or just run it with your running back.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if you know that your offensive line, based on Hamilton's situation with the center being changed out, and based on Ottawa's situation with having an offensive line that's in tough with their 11th different combination of the season through 12, 13 games, whatever it is, and the idea that you've got a quarterback who's not really comfortable doing this, what is the benefit of just saying, well, the stats say we got a yard, so we should always just put somebody in and plunge forward and hope? I understand that it's efficient. I understand the success rate on that stuff. But for me, like, I watched Man Campbell for the Detroit Lions yesterday go fake punt, onside kick. Like, he was just balls to the wall.
He emptied the cupboard yesterday.
Yeah, he's like, we're 0-6. I don't give a damn. I'm just gonna do whatever. Like, let's just go after it. Lapo is in the same situation. Ottawa's not going anywhere this year. So why are you like, well, the book says we have to? If you want tape on Duck Hodges, let him throw it twice towards the end zone from the 9-yard line. What's the shame? What's going to be the harm? You're not going to score. You're going to have to kick a field goal, because I guarantee he knew this dude doesn't know how to do this. Like, it's not as though they put him out there in his first rep ever for the Ottawa Red Blacks at short yardage was in that game. They knew. So just get tape, let them throw it. And later in the game, to their credit, it's 3rd and 10 or whatever, and they're in their own end of the field in the fourth quarter. And what did they do? They just kept the offense out and they let them try to throw it. Well, that's good, because that's coaching tape. That's real life situation. That's where the learning and the evolution happens. So I was a little bit frustrated by that. I feel like sometimes not even necessarily coaches turn their brain off. I just feel like the CFL as a whole just goes, oh, it's 2nd and 2. Let's plunge for. Oh, it's 3rd and 1. Let's plunge for. I'm like, I want to get to the point where coaches are looking at it just like going for it on 3rd down or 4th down and late in games, where they're like, the more dangerous thing that we can do here to really challenge the defense is to just go ahead and line up in the shotgun and throw a quick out. And yeah, if you miss, then everybody crushes you for it. But over time, you will have more success and you will scare the defense more and keep them more off balance. I hope at some point we get there, even if the math doesn't really support it.
Yeah, it was not a good week for QB sneaks on both sides of the border. The NFL, starting with the stupid Josh Allen try to QB sneak, he slips, and Dawkins does not block at all.
Yeah,
and then just gets blown up, and it was a disaster in that game.
I'll say this about Hamilton in terms of the home playoff date, that person you were talking about. I think Hamilton does finish second in the East.
Ahead of Toronto or Montreal?
Ahead of Montreal. I think Toronto is going to go 3-1 over their final four. And the reason that I say that is Toronto is playing at home to BC. They've been very good at home, and I think BC is a wreck right now. So I think Toronto wins this week. Toronto at Ottawa. I think Toronto wins that game. Hamilton at Toronto. A bit of a toss-up. I think Hamilton is more desperate. They probably get that win because
if the Ticats win that game, by the way, they get the season series over Toronto because it's going to come down to point differential, and the Ticats point differential is better than the Argos because of Labor Day.
Edmonton at Toronto is that COVID mess-up makeup game where Edmonton's going to be playing on short rest after, and Edmonton's got Saskatchewan before that. Like, this is going to be like 3 days rest essentially for Edmonton to make up this game. So I think Toronto wins their final game, and I think that they beat Ottawa in Ottawa and against BC at home this week, which means they go 3-1. So I think they're out of the equation. I think Toronto wins the East in the standings. In terms of Montreal Hamilton here, Hamilton has got at Edmonton this week. They should win. Like, that's, if you're going to make a run here and actually you talk about it being time for Masoli, you better win that game against Edmonton because they're not very good this year. BC at Hamilton. Again, I think Hamilton playing at home against BC, who likely is coming off a loss against Toronto. I don't know if BC is going home in between these two games in Ontario or not, but regardless, they should win that game. So Toronto should be able to get that win, and that means that Hamilton would be 2-0. Hamilton at Toronto is the game I talked about. I think they'll be more desperate. They want the season series, so that could be 3-0. And then they finish out the season, Saskatchewan at Hamilton. And that's a toss-up. I'm not sure where that's going to land. But then I look at Montreal, and I know I'm scheduled talk here is super boring when you're listening to a podcast. But I think Hamilton has the ability to go at worst 3-1. I think Toronto definitely goes 3-1. And then I look at Montreal. And Montreal down the stretch here.
They have a tough schedule.
Home to Saskatchewan.
Yep.
Okay. At Winnipeg. Yeesh. Depending on what they decide to do. That might be a Sean McGuire game. And then Winnipeg at Montreal. So those 3 games, that's tough. I mean, they could go conceivably 1-3. If Montreal goes 1-3, Hamilton goes 3-1, Toronto goes 3-1. You've got Toronto winning the East, Hamilton hosting the East semi with the Alouettes coming in with probably Trevor Harris as the starting quarterback at that point, if I were to guess, who came in a playoff game for Edmonton back in 2019, and Hamilton handled him. And the motivation for Hamilton would be, we get a home playoff date here against Montreal. If we
get to sleep at home for the rest of the season.
We get to sleep at home. If we win this game against Montreal in the East semi, and I know I'm looking a long way down the road. If we win this East semi, we get to go down the road and play against our rivals, Toronto, at their house, which Hamilton and Simoni and all those dudes that are staples of the Ticats.
And it's probably a home field advantage.
I
hate to say it.
Yeah, they friggin' love playing in Toronto. I know this from being around the Ticats. They love playing at because they like going in and trying to embarrass the Argos at their place. They do. It's in their DNA. And if they're able to go in there and get the victory against Toronto in Toronto, they're at home for the Grey Cup. So that's why I say I think they are motivated. I think they're locked in. I think Montreal struggles down the stretch based on schedule. I think Hamilton goes 3-1. They finish second in the East. I think they beat Montreal in the East semi. And then that Hamilton-Toronto East final is a toss-up, and holy bleep, what a game that is going to be if we get to that point.
Yeah. And then the winner of that game gets the right to play Winnipeg and try to handle the Bombers. I don't know if you want to talk about the beatdown of the BC Lions. At some point in that game, I felt bad for BC. I was
what point of that game did you feel
bad? The opening kickoff. No, after Winnipeg went up 2 scores, I was
sorry. I was drinking coffee. I wasn't able to laugh at that, or I would have done a spit take. But I agree.
Yeah, it was rough, and for Michael Riley, there was a point earlier this season where I thought BC was turning the corner, and then they're just not. And their pass defense has been brutal this year. I don't know what it is. they rank worse. I think it was 291 yards before the Winnipeg game per game. That's the worst in the CFL. I don't know what's wrong. Like Rick Campbell has gone into BC. I thought it was working, but whatever core of strengths the BC Lions have had, after that Lucky Whitehead injury, it has completely fallen apart.
Yeah, so this is, I actually listened to a podcast the other day on the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with the imposter syndrome, Kyle? Do you know
it every day?
Yeah. So the imposter syndrome, I'll look up the official definition for you here, but it was a really interesting podcast. Imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling a fraud. It disproportionately affects high-achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. Many question whether they are deserving of accolades. I am a 30-year-old person who's calling games on national television, so I listened to a podcast on the imposter syndrome and how to overcome it. I'm just going to be completely transparent with you because I'm like, I don't deserve this shit. I'm like, who gave me this? This is way more than I am worthy of. And so when I look at the BC Lions, they are a team with so much potential. But it's been the things that were successful for them when they were lining up to have a great year have disappeared. I can't remember Jordan Williams making a dynamic play in the last month. He was a stud for them the first half of the season at middle linebacker in his rookie year after being drafted first overall. Their defensive backfield that you talk about, they played the ball better than anybody, I thought, through the first half of the season. Like from top to bottom, whether it was Gary Peters or TJ Lee or Anthony Chiaffi at the Sam linebacker spot, or they were flying around, knocking down passes. I called their game week 4 against Ottawa 8 weeks ago. 2 months ago, they were attacking the football in the air like crazy. They were getting all these turnovers. And now you get to a point where it's like, okay, Lucky Whitehead goes out. Offense looks a little bit stagnant. They can't protect Michael Riley as much as they'd like to. They have no interest in running the football. They can't pass defend it at the line of scrimmage. Their linebacker play has taken a step backwards. Their pass rush doesn't get home nearly as much as it seemed like it did early on. And I hate to say this because I'm calling their game against Toronto this week, but the idea of the imposter syndrome is that you are not worthy of your accomplishments. And I don't know how to frame this other than to say, I feel as though BC is not worthy of the things that I believe they would become. I know that that's a bit of a mind twist on the old imposter syndrome idea, but to me, they, at this point, BC are imposters because the way that they played at the start of the year, they convinced me, and I tweeted this out as well when they were getting set to have a home stretch where they were playing, I think, against Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan 3 weeks in a row, and all 3 of them at home, I think is what it was. And I remember saying, man, they're playing some good football right now, and they've got 3 games at home, and they can really jump up in the standings. What do? They lose. It's in convincing fashion in a bunch of those games. Now they're playing in this game on the road in Winnipeg, and it's like, okay, well, these are the defending champs. They're the team that's at the top of the league. This is a chance to prove that, you know what, we might be able. You might not win, but you got to prove to yourself we might be able to come in here in the playoffs in a West final if we win the West semi and get a victory. Nope, like they didn't show any of that. Now they've got to go on the dreaded Toronto Hamilton double if you're a BC Lions player, and it's like it's unraveling very quickly for them. And I hate to focus on the bad because Winnipeg is so damn good, and we never give them enough credit for just making teams look bad. We always focus on the negative, which I hate. But for BC, they have been fraudulent in the way that they convinced, I think, a lot of CFL fans that they, and I don't think this is just Lucky Whitehead related. I know that's when that really started to unravel.
Yeah.
But that's too easy. It's too easy to say, well, that guy's out and therefore the offense falls to pieces. It feels like more than that. They have unraveled consistently throughout the year, which is disappointing because I love their new ownership group and I want them to get wins at home and I want them to excite that fan base and reinvigorate the area with what Canadian football means. But they just haven't done it. They haven't been able to execute and they haven't been able to pull off the wins that I thought that they were going to earn. And that's really, really disappointing. If Edmonton were not in this league, BC would be the most disappointing team of 2021.
Yeah. To the BC Lions being a kind of wounded animal, I know this is going to sound like it doesn't make sense. I was more impressed. Obviously, I was impressed with the 45-0 destruction of the BC Lions. Super impressed. But I was, and I think every coach will tell you this, the signs of a great team is when you don't play well, yet you still win the football game,
Yeah.
right? Last week against Edmonton, I thought Winnipeg was bad in that game. They did things in that game that I hadn't seen them do all season long. They looked bad. They played bad. If you were, leveling them up to their standards that they had set earlier this season with all those wins in a row, except that Toronto game, which was weird, you would say, oh, that's not the same team. That they're worse. And guess what? Winnipeg still won the game by double digits. So I'm like, oh, that team's great, because to beat them, you're going to have to play a perfect football game.
Mm-hmm.
At least close to damn perfect. You're going to have to hope Winnipeg shoots themselves in the foot, at least one time in that game. And then this game, I just thought Winnipeg started early. They kind of punched BC in the face, in the first quarter. And then after that, BC folded. But for the Bombers, that is a different type of football team.
Yeah.
And, whether it was a Freudian slip by you saying Winnipeg is in the Grey Cup or going to be in the Grey Cup, I think the entire country feels that. I made a joke in the press box, and it was probably a mean joke, especially with the people in Hamilton wanting to see a Grey Cup in this city for the first time in a while. I just said, can we just save the taxpayer dollars and not have a Grey Cup, give the trophy to Winnipeg, and then we can do a big block party to celebrate the end of COVID?
That is mean, but hey, a block party sounds like fun.
Exactly.
But here's what it boils down to for me, and why I say Winnipeg is, like you, special, unique, in going to the Grey Cup. They have to win one football game to be in the Grey Cup. Like, I was talking with
at home.
Yeah, exactly. It's at home. They're going to be rested. And I was talking with Shinetti about this before the Hamilton-Ottawa game this past weekend, where we were talking about Toronto and kind of like what their leadership is like and who steps up. And I, Matt said, well, there's some flaws with this team, and I said, Matt, flaws do not matter in the CFL, because the playoffs are a sprint. This is not best 3 out of 5. This is not a long stretch where you have to win a wild card and win a divisional and win a conference and when you're Winnipeg, and this was kind of the cheat code for Hamilton as well, getting into the Grey Cup in 2019. If you win your division, and this might be a huge help to Toronto this year, if you win your division, you are fresher than everybody. You get to relax. You get to understand your opponent better. You get to sit back, and like, winning your division is such an advantage in the CFL. But regardless, you just have to win one football game. If you play 8 quarters of good football, you are a Grey Cup champion if you win your division. That is crazy. Every single time that I think about the playoff structure in the CFL, and I'm not asking for, I want every team to get in. I think there should be a wild card and a play-in round no, that's a 9-team league. This is the way it's shaped. I
don't want to see Edmonton in the playoffs.
I don't either. Although I was doing a radio interview last week, and somebody suggested to me that Edmonton and Ottawa should play for the first overall pick. And I was like, that sounds like fun. I'm like, I'm
Ottawa would win again.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm down. I would say that's for the season series, but Ottawa already won the season series. And so I look at Winnipeg and the fact that they have to play one game at home, and they're going to be pretty rested. And I'm just like, they're in the Grey Cup. Like, that's how this is going to play out. And Calgary, like, do you have any, if you were to put it, percentage chance, and again, if we're wrong about this, then sure, that's fine. But if you would put percentage chance that Calgary or Saskatchewan, the other 2 playoff teams I believe that will come out of the West Division, would be able to go into Winnipeg and beat them when Winnipeg is rested and playing at home with a crazy home environment, what would that percentage chance be? Because for me at this point, it's maximum 20% for either of them.
I was going to say 5.
Really?
Yeah, I'm at that point. We'll get into the Saskatchewan-Calgary game, but I don't think for Saskatchewan, there's been a point where Winnipeg is their kryptonite and they can't get over that. And I don't think Duke Williams changes it. I don't think one player is going to change it unless the dynamic of their entire offense switches. It's not going to change. And then, do I trust Bo Levi Mitchell from what I've seen this season? Probably not against that Winnipeg. That Winnipeg defense is so good, and they're so consistent. And I don't know how you get over that. You're going to have to put up a boatload of points to even have a shot. And that offense, and the MOP discussion is an interesting one because I don't know who you give it to on Winnipeg. I seriously don't. I think Zach Collaros took a stride to the MOP with his performance over the weekend. He only threw the ball 20 times.
Yeah. Body of
16
work.
completions, 3 touchdown passes, 267 through the year.
Body of work, it probably is Zach, but I would go with one of the defensive ends. Like, I'm actually kind of upset that we can't just say Winnipeg defense. Congratulations, MOP, because they're the most valuable thing that exists in this league at this point. So
You know the way it is, right?
Yeah.
They're going to cancel each other out.
yeah,
And then
it's
all
true.
those quarterback voters, they're going to vote for Zach.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Again, it's the end of the season, and I'll tell you one thing. And you know the way Zach is from his time being in Hamilton.
Yeah.
It'd be good if he would obviously probably want to win the MOP, but he don't give a damn.
No, he doesn't. He wants another Grey Cup ring, and he's also like he's in a very good place in terms of family and setup and life and all those things. So it's like MOP is like that might be a nice little contract bonus. Maybe that's why we want it. But other than that, it's yeah. Let's spend a couple of minutes on Calgary, Saskatchewan here. You mentioned Duke Williams coming in. Interesting that he was very demonstrative, I thought, in this game. But the place I wanted to start as we spend a couple minutes on this game is, my God, the two things. One, the matchup at the end of Calgary, Saskatchewan games with Mark Killam, special teams coordinator and assistant head coach. I believe he's assistant head coach. Mark Killam for Calgary against Craig Dickinson of Saskatchewan when it comes to special teams coaching. That is so much fun. Like seeing those two guys trying to, and at the end of the game, there was a shot of them shaking hands and having a quick conversation. I'm like, this is such a small league. They've played together so many times, played against each other so many times that they very obviously have a respect for one another, but they love coaching against each other. It's very obvious to me that they love the cat and mouse game of that. The second thing is, speaking of coaches, I'm amazed how Jason Moss goes at Cody Fajardo. Have you noticed this, Kyle? At all? Because Jason Moss, when Cody Fajardo, so there was a sequence, this was the 50-50 ball game a couple of weeks ago, right? Where Cody throws an interception, I believe, to Jonathan Moxey at the end of the game. And in his post-game press conference, he says, our guys got to win those balls. You know, we're not getting the 50-50 balls. A couple days later, Duke Williams ends up signing with Saskatchewan. So in that moment, the way this played out, and again, this is just hyper analysis from the outside looking in, was that Cody Fajardo was standing on the sidelines with Jason Moss, and there was a shot of the two of them together. And it looks like Moss tells Cody a play, and then Cody questions it. And Moss gets upset about him questioning it. And Cody goes out and subsequently throws the interception. And then you see Cody walking up and down the sideline, pissed off, grabs his helmet, and the camera catches him saying every single time or every damn time, something to that nature. And I can tell because I've been a quarterback and I know the relationship and the frustration, the marriage of quarterback and offensive coordinator, that Cody was frustrated with that call. He didn't like that call. And your job as an offensive coordinator is not to jam your call into that quarterback's playbook. It's to give the quarterback what he's most successful with. I think I talked about it here on the show. So there's that. Then in this game, late in the game, fourth quarter, and Moss is right to be upset with this, but this was a really interesting thing that TSN caught on camera. Cody Fajardo takes a delay of game penalty. And Jason Moss, when he comes to the sideline, is livid and just goes at him. And Cody was saying, it looked like either he was saying, I didn't get the play in time, or Duke didn't know where to line up, or there was something happening there where Cody was trying to explain it and Moss wasn't having any of it. And Cody is not an argumentative person, but Jason Moss brings a side of Cody Fajardo out on the sidelines that we don't see anywhere else, like anywhere else whatsoever. And I thought the visual this week of Moss getting angry at him, and they went back and forth and back and forth. And about 30 seconds after Moss and Fajardo were arguing on the sidelines about what led to the delay of game penalty, you see Fajardo go over and start to have the conversation with Craig Dickinson. And Dickinson kind of gives him like the soothing of, all right, yeah, we got to be better. All right, it's not great, but that's okay. Let's finish the game. And Moss doesn't have an ounce of that in his approach to Fajardo. His approach to Fajardo is like, do this the way I'm telling you to do this. We don't make mistakes and we don't make them in costly situations. And that dynamic I find to be so intriguing because Fajardo did not ever show that type of emotion on the sideline in 2019 when McAdoo was up in the booth. Now he's got Moss in his ear on the sidelines all the time, and Moss coaches him hard, and it's crazy to watch.
Yeah. So I'm struggling to answer the question of, was that a good offensive performance by the Saskatchewan Roughriders? Efficiency, I would say yes, but outcomes, I would say no. And it harkens me back to what I saw in Hamilton this past weekend, right? Jeremiah Masoli, a completion percentage off the charts. What do you have? One incompletion at halftime.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I put out the stats of everything he was doing in the game at halftime. I said, okay, he's 16 to 17 for this many yards, 8 points. Like, at the end of the day, you have to score. Like, that's the point of the offense. Like, you can do all these checkdowns, get your completion percentage up, but are you putting points on the board? And that's what I'm getting from this game for the Rough Riders. Look, when push came to shove, the Riders were able to get into the end zone with that Braden Lenius touchdown later in the game. But I'm looking at this and thinking, has Saskatchewan turned a corner offensively? And I don't think they have. You have a strange look on your face.
I'm trying to figure out whether or not Marcel Desjardins got hacked or not. On Twitter.
Well, I put out a tweet. How does Marcel Desjardins still have a job after watching the Ottawa Redblacks be as putrid as they are?
Well, let's do this then.
I have an announcement to make, and it's very important, and I'm going to say this right now.
At Redblacks GM tweets, no longer with Redblacks. Happy to be able to spend real time with my wife. Nothing better in life.
Wow. Does he have to change his Twitter handle now?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like when Edmonton was announcing that they were the Elks, and you had to go to esks.com in order to find out from the press release that they were naming themselves the Elks. It was like,
so did he get fired or did he quit?
Who knows?
It sounds like he quit, but he should have quit long time ago.
So punctuation is interesting in this situation because he says, no longer with Redblacks! Exclamation mark.
That's why he quit.
That sounds like a celebration in the punctuation world. It reminds me of one time Dan Le Batard's show with Stugotz. They were talking during a break, and they came back from the break, and Stugotz said to Dan Le Batard and Mike Ryan, his producer, "Hey, Mike, Marty Schottenheimer passed away." And the entire room went, "What? Why did you say that so happy?" Well, he's like, no, I wasn't saying. Yeah, Stugotz, you said that very happily. Hey, Marty Schottenheimer passed away. It was like, you don't say that about. It's weird to not see Marcel come out and just be like, I'm no longer with the Ottawa Redblacks. I appreciate everyone for my time spent in the organization. Instead, it's no longer with Redblacks.
Or the exclamation point was it's some sort of surprise? Like, no longer with the Redblacks. Like nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, so I guess the straw that broke the camel's back was a 29-point loss. Here, just because I have this on file, I want to play this for you. Rick Campbell's veiled statement on Marcel Desjardins in Ottawa as Rick Campbell was leaving the Redblacks a couple of years ago.
My best way to phrase it is I didn't think the status quo was best for the Redblacks going forward, and then decisions were made from there. Is the way I'll put it. You got to treat people well. You got to treat them right and treat them well and empower them and value them. And if you do that, people will go through the wall for you. If you don't, it can make it tougher.
If you don't, they end up in BC being on the coaching staff. So.
In what world is Caleb Evans and Doug Hodges status quo? It's not even that.
Can I just play some Marcel Desjardins audio as the end of our show is taking a twist here today? Here is, again, this is from Rick Campbell the day that he left. I clipped all of these. I might as well use them.
In terms of our conversation, I mean, I found out from Mark before I found out from Rick, and the conversation after the fact was generally that he did not think that our relationship was good enough for him to want to continue in this arrangement. Which, is his opinion. I mean, the relationship has been the same since day one. But obviously the stress of this season must have played a factor in that.
Here is Marcel Desjardins on why Nick Arbuckle was not the Red Blacks quarterback anymore.
Well, what it really boils down to is when we did an evaluation of what we thought our best option would be for that position moving forward. Not that we didn't think Nick was a good option, but we felt that because all the reports out there were that, Toronto was not going to keep Matt Nichols. They weren't going to pay him his bonus. And obviously our coach has a very good rapport and relationship with Matt Nichols. And we felt that if that opportunity arose, then we would at least explore it, which it did. And at the end of the day, we just felt it was in our best interest to go in that direction. So from a financial standpoint, in terms of what the contract is, from a term standpoint, in terms of Nick, at the time when we were negotiating, they were only willing to do 1 year, and Matt Nichols committed to 2 years. So those were all, parts of the reason for doing it. There's other smaller pieces too. For instance, we have this new category in our league right now for veteran American. So you got your
yeah. That's not why. That's not why that ended up happening though. The roster construction and all the rest, but. And then this one, so that was from TSN 1200 in Ottawa when they were interviewing him after that crazy Arbuckle Nichols swap day in free agency just before it. And the question came down, why couldn't you just renegotiate a deal with your quarterback like all the other teams in the league?
Well, I'm not going to get into the details of the negotiation. At the end of the day, the only thing I'll say is that, I think in my estimation, we had to have that number much lower than in a percentage standpoint than what other quarterbacks in the league had made or had been asked to take, I guess. And at the end of the day, I just, I was sticking to a number that I felt was reasonable for a player who had limited starts in our league. And last year's circumstances are totally different than this year's circumstances in terms of, availability of players, in terms of what the cap is, all of those things. So, we were more than willing to let this play out, and it played out, the way it did, and we're not at all, happy with the circumstances as it relates to Nick on the personal side. I feel bad from that standpoint, but that can't be what dictates my decision-making and our decision-making.
And now he's not making decisions.
Everything that he said in that, then why did you get him in the first place? He's making it sound like, this is why we didn't re-sign him. But those all should have been a reason why you shouldn't have brought him in the first place. Or just re-sign him, and maybe you're the problem. Maybe you were the problem, until today, where you're no longer part of the Red Blacks organization.
But I also had heard that Paul LaPolice was the driving force behind that Arbuckle stuff. So if that's true, I don't love Desjardins. What the heck is Desjardins? I don't love Marcel Desjardins being the one that ends up taking the fall for that, if that's true. Like, that seems unfair to him if that is in fact true. But I will also say this, like, he is, we can make fun of this season and the difficulty of the quarterbacking spot with Dominique Davis and Jonathan Jennings in 2019. But I just, in terms of his legacy as the Ottawa Red Blacks general manager, they did win the Grey Cup, right?
Yeah.
Like, he won it with Henry Burris. He helped craft that roster. He was part of the expansion draft. It's not a good ending. It very rarely is in professional football, but to get that championship in 2016, I think should be the thing that sticks with him more than any of the stank that's at the end of this run for him as Red Blacks GM.
I would tend to agree with you if he wasn't also in charge for whatever reason, everything falling apart. Trevor Harris leaves, Greg Ellingson leaves, Sir Vincent Rogers leaves, Rick Campbell leaves. And it's like all of this stuff, it had to stem from some place in the organization. And hearing Rick Campbell saying the status quo wasn't good enough anymore might have been the same reason why Trevor Harris left. And because Trevor Harris leaving, everybody else followed him.
Yeah, I've talked to a CFL source. I don't want to out this person for saying what they said because it's not necessarily the nicest thing about Marcel, but I did talk to somebody about a month ago when I was covering the Ottawa-Toronto game. We were talking about roster development and the way that this stuff is going to go forward. And this person said, Ottawa is one of the very best places in Canada, not just to play football, but to live. It's a beautiful place. They've got an incredible stadium. They've got great facilities. They've got a passionate fan base. So why don't all of the free agents want to go to Ottawa?
Yeah.
And this person said, I think you know why.
Ooh.
Okay.
That is damning.
And maybe that got to the higher ups at OSEG or, whoever has to make these decisions. But if that is in fact true, because I don't know that to be true, because I'm not sitting in negotiating rooms. Like I'm not gonna act like I understand the internal dynamics of all of that. But if that is indeed true, then this decision was likely made because they want to open up more opportunities to acquire talent quickly, and they believe that Marcel maybe being there might have been an impediment to that, based if you're reading the tea leaves of the statement that person passed along to me as I speak in grand generalities. But I got respect for that guy. I think he did a very good job for them at various points, struggled down the stretch. We don't really know the full truth of how this is all shook out behind the scenes of who wanted what and when and how, but Ottawa is a great place to live. It's a fantastic place to play football. And if they start signing free agents left, right, and center going into this offseason, you're going to connect the dots and say, what changed? Okay, people want to play for Lapo, and maybe they didn't like the potential of playing for Marcel as the general manager, and maybe they like this as a more attractive destination going forward. And that we're not going to know that until late spring. Because free agency day itself in February won't tell that story. It will be about people signing from all over the place. Negotiation list people, NFL free agents, CFL free agents. If we get to March and this roster looks much different, that's going to, fairly or unfairly to Marcel, that's going to tell the story.
Yeah. If you're Paul LaPolice now, the biggest priority number one for the Red Blacks moving forward, get a quarterback. Or at least have some confidence in a quarterback week one, because that's not the case this year. And now you can see the remnants of it. Moving forward for that organization until, and again, I don't know who's going to be the incoming general manager. I feel every time, a general manager gets fired or leaves, we have a conversation of, okay, who's next up and who's going to be the general manager? I don't know. Does Drew Alaman get that interview? Potentially. Does he want that job? I don't know. I don't.
Same thing with Berkey. I mean, they're both co-manager of football operations and director of whatever, like the longest title in the world. If one of those two guys wants a shorter title, then maybe that's the chance.
7:51 Monday morning. A text from my girlfriend. It's a screenshot of the tweet that Marcel Desjardins.
She is locked in.
Just got fired.
No, it's culture.
Every time she gets she signs up for like breaking news. Oh, okay. So anytime like a breaking, and apparently this has gotten some wind now that Marcel Desjardins is done. She just says, "Is this drama?" I'm gonna respond, "It's been drama for 3 seasons or 3 years."
All right, let's wrap up this thing. Sorry to anybody who came here hoping to get an in-depth Calgary Saskatchewan recap. I opened up my Twitter in hopes of finding something much different than that, and that's what I was left with. So.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is if you weren't sick of the Stampeders and Riders, well, it's gonna happen again in a couple of weeks in the playoffs.
Get ready! Let's go, a little urgency. Here we go. Let's go.
We're almost out of here. This is the 3-minute warning brought to you by.
It's brought to you by making sure that your movie set guns are not actually loaded or dangerous. What the hell happened with Alec Baldwin?
Yeah. That was sad.
That's terrifying. Like, are you kidding me? On a set of a Western? I don't know any of the details. I haven't read. I've just seen Alec Baldwin killed a person, injured another with a essentially fake gun that he was told was safe that was not. What is that?
So from what I've read, the empty rounds that they fire on movie sets, they're still actual bullets, but
oh good.
No. maybe I was wrong in that. So the front of the bullet has like plastic and paper compressed into it.
Okay.
And when it fires, that is what makes the flash of the gun, and that's why it looks real. And apparently that's what she got hit with. Ooh. She got hit with that because apparently at point blank range, it is still very dangerous. That's my thing. If it's still very dangerous, what the hell are we doing?
What are we doing?
Of weapons on movie sets?
And my question is, how does this not happen more often, considering how many fake quote unquote guns there are on television and movie sets?
I know.
Well,
I'm pretty sure there's like, hey, only put the weapon in somebody's vicinity when they need it. Apparently, he was like walking around with it and and he was, I don't know. It's a mess. I feel so sorry for that woman's family. She had a long career in cinematography, and I think she was director of cinematography or whatever.
Brutal. Anyway, sorry to bring the show down on a sad note at the end. I saw that story over the weekend. I was like, what? How is this even possible? So that's going to do it for us on the show today. He is at Kyle_Melo_. I'm at TSN_Marsh. We are Marsh and Melo here on Canadian Football Perspective for you. Hope you enjoyed the show today. What do you think I end up titling this podcast, Kyle? I could do Week 12 recap. I was thinking maybe DesjarDONE.
Oh, I like that.
Okay,
DesjarDONE.
All right, DesjarDONE.
I'll get some retweets.
We'll go with that. Have yourselves a great Monday, everybody. Thank you for listening. As always, don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at CF Perspective, Canadian Football Perspective. Great week of shows lined up for you here. OUA show is live now. Got All Canadian coming up tomorrow, where they'll announce the OUA Players of the Week and discuss more around Week 12. And myself and Derek Taylor have the breakdown coming up for you on Wednesday. For now, have yourselves a great day, and we will talk coming up next week right here on Marsh and Melo.